Welcome back, everyone, to the CrossFit Games podcast. I'm your host, Chase Ingraham, and with me is Adrian Conway and Margaux Alvarez as we are previewing and reviewing day number 2 and day number 3 of the Dubai CrossFit Championship. We just did day number 1 yesterday, and we kick things off in Dubai with a maxed lift, followed by one heck of a chipper, and then a cool little elimination format to close things off. But as we look at the day as a whole, day 2 of a 3-day competition affectionately is often called moving day because you usually have the most events. The first day of events can be sort of niche, especially if you think about the CrossFit Games. They were pretty niche yesterday in Dubai. So a lot of different events and a lot of things can happen. And right off the bat, when we look at the leaderboard as it stands now, it's not fully updated after the 4th event, but we do know who stands on top of the leaderboard for both the men and the women. But Adrian, on the men's side being moving day, who made the biggest move or biggest statement for you for day number 2?
Well, I'll tell you, when I think about movement in general, I'm going to specifically focus on movement that matters. And I got to give it to Jeffrey Adler, or Adler. Sorry about that. But he specifically, the way he executed, which he did what we expected him to do on the liftoff. But then you look at event 3, you look at that chipper, the way that he was able to execute that and come top 3 in an event, again, where he gets an opportunity to show his newfound engine, his newfound ability to pace, and really show some newfound strengths, I think.
Yeah.
I couldn't be more impressed, to be honest with you. The ability not just to refine a skill is one thing, but the ability to actually express it on the field of competition when the pressure is the highest is something that we've got to tip our hats to. And I think that Jeff today, because of that, in my mind, made the biggest statement. And then even through event 4, we don't have the official results, but I think he was right there in the top 2 of that finish as well. So a lot of exclamation points for me today with Jeffrey Adler.
Adrian, you had a very specialized background with football prior to getting into CrossFit. How hard is it? Because, I'm sure you had some wheelhouse strengths that you like to hold on to dearly, but you also had some major weaknesses that you had to shore up before you were to step into the individual competitive scene. How tough is it to relinquish maybe being the best of the best at this one thing that you've always been able to be top 2, top 3 at, and maybe take a half step back, but take maybe 5 steps forward in another area that you needed to shore up? How tough is that for an athlete?
It's very tough. I will share that as a power athlete in my upbringing, you catch me on a good deadlift, back squat, strict press day, baby. We're having a heck of a time.
See at the CrossFit Total.
See me at the CrossFit Total and see me in any short sprint, right? When we're getting to use our legs and do the thing. But for me, what I had to do, and I'm fortunate enough to have some great mentors and coaches that surrounded me, even highly competitive athletes. And, the advice I got was you have to lean stronger and heavier into your weaknesses. And while that's hard and takes time to build, it was really difficult mentally because it hurts your confidence when you're going into the gym day in and day out for months in a row, focused on actually what you categorically suck at. And
right.
To see athletes be able to humble themselves in a way where they can prioritize that, it's really refreshing to see it pay off for someone like Jeffrey out there on the floor, because it's hard to do.
Yeah, it sounds tough. Margaux, who on the women's side impressed you today?
Andrea Niesler, looking at her, again, I just put that out there. But looking at her and how she was consistent every round, qualifying for the top 4, that final heat, just to see her movement and how she was diligent. And obviously it came down to milliseconds. Execution is huge. And so just to see her move through that and be consistent to finish in the top 4, I think that's something that really stands out. That's going to help kind of push her up a little bit closer to the top 3 spot, depending on how things finish with final numbers and how the next 2 workouts will kind of maybe dictate if she can even push to that top 3. We'll see number wise, but I just loved her consistency, and she's been competing for a number of years now. And I think that experience is huge because you can play off that experience. You can remember all right, I know this is like, I did a workout like this, and now I can play back those emotions and how I felt. And I think especially with sprint style workouts, that adrenaline can get to you. And if you're relatively new to competing or you don't have many competitions or years under your belt, that could get the best of you, where, maybe you go to snatch the bar versus clean and then squat jerking it. And that might make the difference of, qualifying for that next round or the next heat. So she was someone that I saw that was very smooth and consistent in terms of her execution.
Now, Margaux, you said she's leaning a lot on her background. Now, Nisler's major background is actually team competition, where she did stage 1 of 2020 as an individual. But I mean, I think we just throw that number and stats really out the window when it comes to that. And you're quite the opposite. You made your career as an individual, but you did team 1 year at the games. And what is that like, switching between the two? What's the major difference of being an individual versus a team athlete?
I mean, individual is all on you. You can't rely on the team, but obviously the team competition has changed because there are a lot of workouts where you maybe can't, you all have to share the workload. So the individual experience that I've had for the, consecutive 6 years that I went, I think it was great because it allowed me to not rest on my laurels, but I could refer back to previous years or previous training days to allow me to have that experience. And individual, it's unique in the sense where it's all yourself. Yes, you have a coach, you're talking to other athletes and how their experience has been. I know Adrian both have that experience as an individual. And I think it's unique because it gives you this perspective where it's you versus yourself on the field. Whereas in a team competition, depending on what the movement is, depending on what the workout is, you either share the load, you have to make sure you're completing your portion so that you can get through that, muscle up, pull-ups, whatever it might be, to get to the next movement. And depending on the style of the workout, you got to make sure you bringing everything to the table so you don't mess it up for everybody else, and that you don't want to be that weakest link. But at some point, and I learned this in 2019, competing at the games as a team, at some point you will be the weakest link, and you have to be okay with that. You can't, get inside your head and be like, you feel sorry for yourself and you feel bad. You have to say, hey, this may not be my strongest event. I will do my best, because on the other side, there will be an event that's the best for you, and someone else, it will be their weakest event. So it's that kind of balance, ebb and flow between you and your teammates for the team competition.
I like that. So let's talk about what we know so far. There's still one event that needs to be updated on the overall leaderboard, but we do know who's at least standing on top of the leaderboard. And let's start on the men's side, because Roman Karenikov has had himself one heck of a day. And Adrian, I think the biggest leap he had, or the biggest statement he had, was actually in the liftoff portion, other than the other two that we figured he'd fare well in.
I completely agree. And, the thing that I'll share with you guys, this does not surprise me about Roman, right? Like I have had the fortunate insight to even see some behind the scenes with his training and development throughout the years. I mean, this is a guy that back in, 2015, between 2015 and 16, was on Chris Henshaw's radar because of his aerobic capacity and the things that he saw from him around the side. And then he got connected to a team of coaches that I was associated with. So I got to see him put in this work and lay this foundation of fitness throughout the years. And he has always been set apart. Like, it's crazy. The mind behind this athlete and his ability to put in the work every single day is really astonishing. He's a bit of a, a Russian machine, if I can. So I think that to see him step up in a strength event, to put that together on the floor, I think one of the things that we see, not just in Roman, but throughout the way the standings played out in that event, was that you really needed to know your strength. And we alluded to this yesterday, guys, where we talked about, hey, when you only got 2 attempts, and there's many choices with weights, it's really tempting to just be like, that's what I'm going to go for. But to know where your strength reserves lie and the ability to take a chance, or the ability to play it safe, but to get 2 solid numbers, it seemed to be the difference maker there in that clean and jerk event. And Roman showed us all.
Margaux, how about yourself? Is, looking at especially the first event of the day, right? Technically, it was event number 2 because we had event 1A, 1B. So the first event being that liftoff, and as Adrian said, it was a very unique format because not only was it 2 lists, and that's not foreign to a lot of these competitors and these athletes, but rarely have you been pigeonholed to pick a certain weight and not be able to change it at the last minute. In this event, you had to call what weight you wanted to do, and you had 1 attempt. It wasn't 20 seconds to get as many as you could if you miss. Like, there is some high pressure stakes in event number 2 today.
Yeah, it's funny because watching the event, it reminded me a little bit of a parallel to golf. So I've golfed over for 10 years, and I look at the situation where if I'm playing a hole and there's some water to the right and a sand trap to the left, do I want to maybe lay up a little short so that I don't go into the water or don't go into the sand? Or do I want to go with a longer club and then try to hit the green and save that extra rep? But if I chunk it and I don't hit it clean, then I'm going to the water and then I might have to take an extra stroke. So seeing that scenario kind of reminded me of this when I was watching. I was like, all right, well, you need to be comfortable with the load that you decide to start with, because it's like, I need to get this in the bank, especially when they created that rule where you need to do 50% of the work. You got to make sure you get one lift. If you don't, then you're out and you lose any money if you want any top 3 spots. So I look at it as like, all right, let me be a little conservative on that first lift to make sure I get a number in the bank. Then on the second lift, I can make a decision. Do I want to try to go for it and try to hit the green and try to hit my PR? Or do I be a little more conservative, get a second lift and that's under that, but at least that gives me maybe 5 pounds, 10 kilos over what my competitor might try to go for. But if they miss it and they go big, then that puts me in that advantage spot. So it's kind of a little bit tactile, or very not tactile, but very, you got to look at a technical decision of what's best for you. And you're aware of everyone, but again, you can't control what those people are going to hit. So it's what's ultimately best for you that you can get that like lift in and check that box.
I found it very interesting. I think the 2 lifts dramatically changed the way people approach this as the quote strength event. Adrian, how much do you think adding a 3rd lift would have changed that event?
Oh, dramatically. Dramatically. I think we see some of the guys that are in the top 5, top 6 that get an opportunity at another lift. It allows you the freedom to take much greater risk. And this sounds crazy, right? For us as maybe gym members, for those of you that are tuning in and hanging out with us, it's like, if you showed up and you got to warm up, but you only got 2 attempts to put onto that whiteboard today, right? You understand there would be tremendous pressure, but that 3rd attempt then gives you a bit of a wiggle room where that second attempt, even if you want to use it to create more confidence for your 3rd, or that's really where you decide to start taking risk, you then know how to approach the 3rd attempt. So it's funny because as an athlete, I like both aspects, right? I like the way they pigeonholed the athletes into tough choices because that is sport. But from a spectator's perspective, I'm like, I just really want to see them lift the heaviest weight that they can lift.
Yeah.
So whatever sets them up for that, show me that.
Margaux, how about you? 3rd lift to make it a bit more of an interesting test.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what Adrian's saying in the aspect of like, all right, it gives them that maybe a little more wiggle room, but it also, even if you miss your second lift, it gives you that 3rd attempt to go, whether you stay the same load or you go up in weight, trying to like lift the most weight that you possibly can, try to hit a PR. And of course, it's always fun to watch Sarah when, she throws that celebratory, arm in the air and gets like all
Yeah,
smiley,
yeah.
like you see the energy, like, oh, that's awesome. And of course the crowd feeds off of that. And the community definitely gives a little bit of that to the athletes as well. But if you open that spot for a 3rd lift, it gives you that wiggle room. We're like, all right, well, I missed my second lift. I had it, but I was a little forward. I pulled a little early. I was anxious. So it opens up the spot to secure a second lift or even 3rd lift, but then that puts you in a better position. But again, it's like, how do you want to play that? It's up to the individual, but it opens the playing field where it gives you a little more wiggle room.
I agree. I think a third attempt, I don't want to sound negative, but I think a 3rd attempt would have been a better test of a strength event. Because 2 just was like, 2 felt like trying not to screw it up, not trying to lift as heavy as you could. Whereas 3, you really would have seen some athletes be able to build up to something fairly heavy, as opposed to trying to be super conservative on 1, because there was also a rule in play here, and it was in play all day, is a 50% rule. If you bombed out on your list, you were out of the competition. So if you don't get 50% of any of the work completed, at least today and tomorrow, you are actually removed from competition. So it wasn't just the fear of getting last, but it was the fear of getting eliminated from competition completely. So I feel like the 2 lifts and that rule made people very, very overly conservative on rep 1. And then they had to make either a mild jump because, they were so low in the first rep to the second one, or too big of a jump and where they ended up missing it. So
Mhm.
I'm with you guys. I really would have liked to see 3 lifts there. I think it only would have made the competition better. I don't think it would have extended the competition longer than it already was. And but hey, that's why we get to sit back and armchair this a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll even add that from a training perspective, like when these athletes take the floor, this is why strength reserve actually matters. And what I mean is that some people's argument is that, well, you only need to be as strong as the field, or you only need to be as strong as X, Y, or Z, or you don't need to win strength events. But when you do get this kind of pressure and you know that you can confidently hit a particular weight, and if that has a greater buffer than the rest of the field, you roll into this event knowing like, hey, for example, Jeff Adler, right? Like we know that
Right.
he has a very strong clean and jerk and has performed extremely well at some of these events. And whether he chooses to risk it all and go for first, he knows exactly what he needs to do just to get a top 3 or a top 2 or something like that. And that's a tremendous advantage when you understand that you've put in that time to build that kind of strength reserve, where it's like, we're playing with house money here.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was event 2. Roman, after at least the first 4 scored events for the day, was sitting on top of the leaderboard. And the big question coming into this weekend, I think for everybody, with one of our who's sitting in a podium pick for both of us on the women's side, is Laura Horvath. And the question always remains until she succeeds is, how is she going to handle, say, a handstand push-up event? Well, we had the handstand push-up event today, and Laura Horvath not only got through it, but she got through it and finished very well as she finds herself on top of the leaderboard for the women's side. Again, this is after 4 scored events, although we know she won the 5th one. So Laura Horvath survives the handstand push-up and is now, I would say, the clear front runner to hold that first place position. Margaux, after seeing, Laura missed her second rep on the clean and jerk. I think she's going for a PR, and that's the gamble and the issue with 2. Survives event 3 and does well. I mean, what did she get in that event? Was it a top 5 finish?
Yes.
For Laura within a handstand push-up event. So
Yes.
Hallelujah for Laura Horvath in a handstand push event. She gets second overall in that event, and then comes out and wins the last one. How does Laura look to you going into the final day?
I mean, give her huge props. She looked great. I know that handstand push-ups, specifically strict, have been one of her weaknesses, been something that she struggled with. And I relate to that, as that's something I've struggled with as myself as an athlete. But to see her move through those reps consistently, she was smooth. They looked obviously great execution. The women were kipping, the men were strict. I think that might have changed. Definitely change the workout a little bit. But even watching her bar muscle ups, she had a great kip. She was getting relatively high on the top of the bar, and obviously as the reps went on, she got a little bit lower. But to see her accomplish that, get through that, and finish second to Sam Briggs, I mean, it was man, like, give a little like round of applause to her. Like, that's awesome. Like, she's put in the work to get there. So I talk about, celebrating the successes. That's a success she definitely should celebrate and embrace. And I think, like you said, it solidified that spot on top of the podium. And I don't think she's going to be moving away from that first spot. It'll be interesting to see how that next workout goes with the muscle ups and thrusters. I know Kristen Holte will do a relatively good job on that because those are 2 of her strengths. But I think with Holte, pushing her, Laura might be able to, again, I don't think she'll take away that top spot, but there might be a battle between those 2 in that event. But for Laura, I mean, phenomenal job. Great to watch her execution on that. And I think she's kind of overcome one of those challenges, which she now can kind of put that in a reserve. Like, cool, I feel a little bit better about myself. I have more confidence, which would be great going into other competitions down the road.
Adrian, what about you? Because I've sensed this in some of your tone when talking about Laura's weaknesses, and I'm the same way. Is that you've had this issue for so long, and it's the one thing that is really truly holding you back from greatness. And yet today, it looks like she turned the corner a little bit. What was it like for you watching that?
You know what it was like? It was like she should extremely thank the Dubai programmers. There's only 10 and that they're kipping.
Yeah. I mean,
so listen, while she had a victory today, and listen, Laura, shout out to you, girl, and your team around you. You did a great job executing in this workout. We haven't really tested what we have been talking about in regards to her limitations in this particular workout. There were 10, they were kipping, they were parallel amongst a workout that took 23 minutes to 24 minutes. Those things took about 50 seconds for even the slowest of the athletes. So I would say that I bet that she has made some improvements. This workout didn't necessarily prove that to me. And as a commentator, as someone reviewing the day, that's just the way I'm going to shoot it, is that she didn't really prove me anything. So,
all right.
I will say this though, that girl executed that workout amazingly. And I think that if she doesn't do so many touch and goes on the back half of that workout, she beats Sam Briggs and pulls through with the number 1 at the end of that workout.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. We were actually, as we're watching this weekend unfold, we were talking about athletes doing touch and go sandbag cleans in the middle of that chipper event, which had 60 of them. And the question came up, or I think the statement was like, why are people touch and going sandbags at this amount of volume when clearly you could see that wasn't the strategy that you should have done? And Adrian, as you said, is that no one that won that chipper touch and goed any of those reps on the sandbag portion. So.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, look, you guys, we've all coached, we've taught seminars. Like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. and it's like, we see this often, and I've been lulled into it myself. Other athletes have like tricked me into doing it because they were doing it, type thing. But then to really see the fruits of the patience of the athletes that did singles, and what they were doing was controlling their heart rate and controlling their response to when those sandbag cleans were over, so that they could make haste and do work on the A jumps in the row to finish the workout strong. And I think, I don't know that Sam even could have done touch and go if she wanted to, right? Because of where her strength is versus Laura's. But it shows a lot of discipline and self-control to be able to do that in a moment such as that, where Sam did want to win that workout, because I think she probably knows she's not going to win the competition as a whole this weekend. But I do understand also where Laura was like, man, if I come out big right here for a set, maybe I'll get a lead and hold on to it in the latter part of the workout. But you got to decide if the juice is worth the squeeze.
So that brought up another topic when specifically about this. And when we look at the third event, the fourth scored event of the weekend, which was that brutally long chipper, is the weight of the sandbag, is that we didn't see very many, if at all, men try to touch and go this, where we saw a handful of women do it with relative ease. And the question comes up, and I feel like this has been building over the last couple of years, especially when you see open weights and open workouts and chippers and ladders, is it time to up the weights on the women's side? And I mean this, and I'm coming from a completely positive perspective, is that the evolution of the women in the sport of CrossFit has been exponential since 2007. You're talking about throwing in pull-ups and handstand push-ups to a demographic that traditionally didn't train that in sport or competition or in fitness 15, 20 years ago, let alone 30. And CrossFit, I feel like, was really the first fitness program, and obviously sport, to showcase that no, women can, should, and are good at all of these things. And what I've seen over the last few years is that the women are making these weights look too light. The time discrepancies between the men and the women in similar events are widening between both demographics. And in this event in particular, between the 150-pound sandbag for the men and the 100-pound sandbag for the women, it was two completely different tests after watching it. It was a sandbag clean event for the men. It was just a long grinder chipper for the women. Margaux, I'm going to defer to you. Obviously, you are you are our resident female superstar on the show. But what are your initial thoughts on just at least starting that conversation?
I think it's definitely one we can have. I mean, I look back to 2007, 2008, 2009, and the weights and what women were doing back then. And you watch videos of the movements and the proficiency of movements, or the lack of proficiency for that matter. And it's definitely changed. It's evolved at a very fast rate. And I think the discussion can definitely be opened up. It's like, all right, do we start to add heavier bags? Do we change the percentages a little bit. And obviously people that are just finding CrossFit or just getting to the gym, they've never done, pull-ups, they've never done gymnastics works, they've never done a snatch. That's obviously a different conversation, but we're talking about competitors at elite level that have been training for a number of years, competing for a number of years. Do we change that? I think it's something we can definitely start to discuss, even watching the men versus the women, seeing the women. And like I said yesterday, I love sandbag cleans, whether it's with a D-ball or a sandbag. And I saw a lot of women, touch and going, obviously, but also it was a muscle clean, meaning they weren't rebending the knees, where a lot of the men at certain point, whether the front end or the back end of those reps, they were kind of, getting it up to almost to the shoulder, but they'd drop underneath it like a power clean and then stand up full hip extension. And it's tough too, because I think, all right, well, is it a lighter weight that women are just able to manhandle and move, or woman handle, however you want to denote it, and get through that weight at a faster time, where the men were taking more time, they're resting a little bit more, and it taxed them a little bit. And I think that's, again, this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but you go into the posterior chain discussion we talked about yesterday that I mentioned, like, all right, they're literally just hinging from the hip, not getting underneath it. Are the women training more with their back so that they can do that? How did their ski event go? I saw a lot of women and men shortening their range of motion on the skier, meaning they weren't getting full hip extension. So the more reps that you're doing closing the hip, maybe put more strain on the back. And if the guys were doing that more, does that then affect them come this workout, where they're like, all right, my back's a little more fatigued, I have to get underneath it, versus let me just muscle it up? Again, a little bit of a rabbit hole. Back at the beginning, what we were talking about, I think we can definitely open that discussion to say, hey, do we do a 125 for the women, for the sandbag? That's definitely something we can start kind of playing around, tossing around, no pun intended.
Adrian, for you look, your background is extensive as anybody's here, from, coaching, seminar staff, individual competitors, you being in the sport for as long as you have been, watching the evolution of the women in the sport. What are your thoughts on just starting this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this is a whole podcast episode in itself, right? We could prepare and talk about this for a very long time. And that is the true beauty in our sport. There's no doubt about the fact that we put the men and the women on the same level playing field and do our best to legitimize this test for both sexes, and making sure that everyone is getting tested to their full capacity. The one thing that I'll say, even in witnessing that, is I'm thinking through and I'm like, I think this is actually probably, and Margaux, you can tell me otherwise, but I think this would be a workout that either of us popped up, we'd be like, oh, I'm going for it on this workout. This is a good one for me, right? It's a lot of hinging. It's a lot of pulling. I believe that both of us, background wise, would be excited about something like this. And I'm going to tell both of you guys, Margaux would dust me in this workout with these weights, right? And I'm just looking at the fact of those 30 cleans on the back half, to be more specific, the amount of failed cleans we saw from the men. Like you were mentioning, Margaux, the women are just muscle cleaning it. We watched Laura Horvath literally open with like a set of 10 touch and go on the back half. And one thing that I'll consider is it might not even be quite as black and white as just the weight, the 150 and the 100, but thinking about the circumference of the bag. So like if we could minimize or think about the overall wingspan, right? And this is, again, we're in the weeds a little, but the wingspan or the size of the men isn't really a ton larger than a lot of the females. And in regards to that, it's like, if we look at minimizing the bag, or making them more comparable in size, similar to the comparable size of a barbell, while one's shorter, it's not as drastically different in size or circumference. I think it might change the way the guys move through that 150 pounds versus having to bear hug the stone or the bag that's much larger in circumference. Because I think that really does make a difference, especially when you think about the way you have to round over a bag, a lot of them, to hug it, and the way it feels once you get it up onto the lat position or right around your torso.
So it's decided we're going to do like a whole podcast on this, right? Maybe a podcast series. We'll do weights, gymnastic boxes, wall ball heights. I'm gonna die on that wall ball height hill. It's 10 feet for everybody. I'm sorry. 5'4" is 5'4". I love it. All right. So, hey, great news. The podium has been updated. Nice. So let's take a look. We will start with the men sitting in first place. It is, as we thought, Roman Karenikov with 465 points. But in second place, it is Canada's Jeffrey Adler at 418. And then Lazar Jukic sitting in third, just 6 points back of Jeffrey Adler at 412. In fourth place, Ricky Garrard sitting at 402. So he's only 10 points out of a podium position, with Willie George actually sitting inside the top 5. Now he's about 40 or 36 points out of podium contention, or behind Ricky. So 40 points out of a podium. There's still a lot up for grabs tomorrow. I'm looking at the events that are possibly happening, and it looks like we're going to have 4 scored events. It looks like we have event 5, 6A, 6B, and 7. And if they do 6A, 6B like they did event 1A and 1B, there are 400 more points up for grabs tomorrow. But that is the men's side. And you guys hear who your top 3 is and how tight that race is. It's between second and fourth of Adler and Ricky. It's only 16 points with Lazar Jukic in the middle. Margaux, here in the top 3, what's your first reaction to that?
I mean, I think Roman's going to keep that top spot. I don't think he's going to really budge in terms of, you look at that points. I mean, ahead of Jeffrey, that's a good 50, a little under 50 points.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's pretty much secure that spot, unless, the next 2-3 workouts aren't up his alleyway. But I think he's shown his proficiency in movement, but also, you could tell how excited he was when they did the post interview with him. And he was just thrilled to be back. He's excited to be back. There's this energy. So I think I imagine that he's going to continue on that good energy level. But again, he has to make sure he comes up and proves it. But again, looking at where he's at, I think he'll keep that top spot. It'll be interesting to see how 2, 3, and 4, and even Willie in 5th. I competed with Willie, a few years ago, and it's great to see him back in the competition. I would love for him to pop into that top 3 spot. But it'll depend on the point spread and how that work out. But Ricky, I had him as my number 1 spot, so clearly need to readjust that a little bit.
Get it together, Ricky. Adrian, how about you? Seeing Roman on top, but the tight race. I mean, you got Adler, Lazar, and Garrard, 3 fighting for 2 spots. But I mean, Willie George, like I said, it's only 30-something points out of a podium position, with 400 up for grabs tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a lot to happen still, no doubt. But to see the podium play in the way that it has, again, I mean, Jeffrey Adler has impressed me severely today. Again, with execution, showing his newfound, I would say fuel injectors for his engine. And then we got Lazar. Can we give him? Can he be called Laser? Is that a nickname?
I mean, I think the Serbian Laser is that.
That's excellent.
It's done. It's settled. You've heard it on the official podcast of the CrossFit Games. The Serbian Laser, it is.
I mean, but watching him execute the way he did in event 3. I mean, I sent a text to you guys and said, he's just excellent at work. The general work capacity, this guy just moves well. He suffers well. He's just nonstop. I was like, this is where he's going to start to slow down on the sandbag cleans. Nope. He just kept picking it up, just kept picking that darn thing up. And I was impressed by that. So to see them top 3 is awesome. And to see Ricky drop to 4, I gotta say I'm surprised, and where I was really surprised was in that last elimination workout that we saw for the day, and some of the execution points and choices that were made there. I was pretty surprised. So I think we're in for a very exciting final day. There's a really great workout to kick it off with the thruster and ring muscle ups, of course, but a lot of that A and B is erg work, and so I think our man Roman's just going to continue to go all gas pedal and do the thing that he's been doing all weekend.
I love it. So let's look over at the women's side, and it's eerily similar to the men's side as far as points, because Laura Horvath is sitting in first place with 465. Roman also had 465. Kristen Holta sitting in second place at 416. Adler was 418. And so that's very close. And in third place, Gabriela Magala, only 3 points back of Kristen Holte, with Sam Briggs sitting in fourth place. She is just 22 points out of a podium position, 25 points out of a second place position. And we had a strength test. So Sam survives what is her kryptonite, which is heavier weights. And if you look forward to tomorrow, we'll get to the events at the end of the show and we look forward to day 3. But day 3 does not look bad for Sam Briggs. Margaux, I think anything's up for grabs at this point, maybe other than Laura Horvath staying in first place.
Yeah, Sam if I'm looking at that next workout, which I know we'll talk about in a second, but I think that workout's going to be great for Sam. And I think that she's right out of the top 3 spot. So if she can continue to execute and do what Sam does, which she always does, she has the possibility of jumping back into that top 3 spot in terms of the points. And I mean, like I said, Andrea, she made a move. She's not out of contention. She's still there. She still has that possibility to move up to the top 3 spot, but it'll be dependent on, how the muscle ups, how is it going to be with the other 3? Like I said, I think Laura, she's been super consistent. I think she has that top number 1 spot locked out, just like Roman does. I don't think she's going to move from that. So 2, 3, 4, 5, I think there'll be a little bit of shifting. And again, I had Kristen up there and Gabriella at the top. So I would love to kind of see the battle and how it's going to go in terms of the final finishes. But I think there's a possibility for there to be a little more shift. But again, Sam, I know that first workout tomorrow is going to be a good one for her.
I'm excited. Before we get to day number 3, let's talk about the things that surprised us the most on day number 2. Adrian, I'll start with you. Is that what athlete or performance or event that happened today shocked you the most?
Man, can I pick 2?
Hey, yeah, let's go.
Listen. Well, hey, look.
Unless one of them is Margaux's, have we?
I know. I was going to say, well, if it's
All right,
mine.
you pick one. You pick one. Margaux will go 2, and if you still got it, I'll give it back to you.
I love it. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and lead then with my top pick of the weekend. My prized horse, Ricky Garrard.
Yeah.
He let some points on the board, I think, in event 4. And that was one of my biggest shocks. I watched him even in heat 1 of that particular event, and the way he was handstand walking and got off that bike, I was like, okay, hey, we're looking good. Like, my man handstand walked like the fastest tempo. And so I was like, okay, it'll play out. It'll take care of itself. And then he snatched that bar up over his head and it looked a little wobbly. Got it. I was like, okay, hey, no worries. That was the first snatch. His legs are tired from all the sandbag cleans, but he wasn't able to pull together in that next round. And I think that was my biggest surprise. I had greater expectations for him in that event, the way it was played out, and even the movements that were present. I thought he would flourish a little bit more. So that was my surprise on the men's side.
Margaux, what about you?
So I also picked someone from the men's side, Tola. I know we talked a little bit about him yesterday.
Yeah,
And that was, I think, my eye was on him, and I was kind of, trying to look for him and see where he was at. And I just expected in terms of his capacity, but also strength and efficiency on his hands, that he was going to make it into that top 4. I mean, if maybe top 8 spot for that workout and that event. And seeing, I believe he finished 18th. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, 18th in that workout. And that was kind of one of the biggest surprises. I was kind of rooting for him, and I wanted to see him, do a little bit mix up, but then not have it follow through. I just was a little taken back. I was just anticipating a different finish and anticipating a different outcome than what it actually did. So that was my pick.
Adrian, what was your second one?
Oh, man. The same girl that surprised me yesterday, Sarah Sigmund's daughter, just coming back from this injury and getting a 4th place on an event like stinking event 4, where it's just rep after rep after rep or heat after heat. And you have to execute with speed to get up under that overhead squat weight, whether you chose to snatch it, which she did every single time. I was literally dumbfounded. I was like, no way. Like, this girl's back. She's legit. Give her another 2 months and we're going to see a pretty darn well-rounded and ready to compete Sarah Sigmund's daughter when it's time for the Open.
I mean, that is a great one. After day 1, I was like, okay, so we did better than I thought we would, especially in the conditions, running around in snow, big downhills, coming off a knee injury. I'm curious how the strength has come back in the limited time that she's had to work on it. And then she goes out and lists a near personal best in the clean and jerk. And then you're right, the A jumps, the sandbags, all those things. And then the sprints in the overhead squat is, I think, Sarah might be one of my biggest surprises of the day, just about overall how her performance has been of what I thought coming in. I mean, I was like, I don't know if you're ready to come back. And now I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. No, man. Yeah.
You better than I know you, obviously. So that comes to it. So, okay. So that is day 2. Now let's take what we learned from day 2 and turn our attention to the 3rd and final day of competition. As we said before, we have a potential of 400 points. We'll start things off with event number 5, and that's a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 ring muscle ups and thrusters at 60 and 40 kg. So it's about 132 188 pounds. So heavier thrusters, only 30 lifts, but we do have an ascending ladder. And event 6A and 6B after that, this is dirty. And it's called Athlete's Choice for a reason. I think it's because you can choose what hill you'd like to die on. So it's a 21:15.9 Echo Bike Toes to Bar S6A, 6-minute cap. They'll only rest 1 minute and go right into 21:15.9 calorie row and bar facing burpees. And then we have an unknown event 7. So let's talk about what we know so far and how we think things will shake out. Adrian, I'll start with you. Knowing what's on the horizon, other than the final event, which we'll get to as far as what we may think will happen, how does this look for those fighting for a podium position and trying to stay in first on the men's side?
Really, I think there's an opportunity for some change. There's an opportunity for variability, but I think a lot of what we see currently in the leaderboard could stand. And the reason is because I think a lot of these guys now that have found themselves within that striking distance of the podium, the top 5 specifically, maybe top 6, I think we kind of have a general understanding of their skill set and work capacity and the ring muscle ups. I love with the thruster, that combination is devastating. If you've ever done a workout with those two movements together, particularly at the loads they've chosen. But the ascending rep scheme, it will have a way, I think, of drawing athletes out, potentially starting a bit too fast, maybe jumping up to those rings on that round of 8 a bit too soon, or hanging on for bigger sets than maybe they should. So I'm excited because of the layout of that particular workout to see what will happen there. And then goodness, on part A and part B of athletes, it's really about that motor and about that engine. So as we think about what these athletes will have gone through up until that point throughout the last several days, it's who's in the best shape currently as we stand within the current season or off season, and really who knows themselves the best, because there are going to be some athletes drawn out due to desperation, right? We look at an athlete where Ricky Garrard is sitting in 4th. He will have more desperation than Jeffrey Adler sitting in 2nd, relatively comfortably, kind of. But Ricky knows that he's got to beat some guys to get back there in a vying position to compete. And so that's one of always my favorite things about a final day of competition is there's some desperation out there on the floor and people got to really step up or step out. So I'm excited to see, but I don't believe there will be a ton of shifting going into the final day for the guys.
Margaux, in general, when you look at the events we have coming up, I feel like there is a potential for some volatility with the style events, right? You have the fail potential and the muscle ups, right?
Mhm.
All it takes is one guy to go too fast or one girl to do too many, and it's over. And that 40-point lead that we thought was safe is gone. With a 21:15.9 format, especially with the way they're set up in those couplets, there's not a lot of room for error. And when it comes into an events like, let's just say 6A and 6B, for example, there's no skill there. Your training does have some part of it, but it's a huge, huge want to event back to back. And I think that's really where the name starts to come into Athlete's Choice, is that you're not so strong that you're going to excel. You're not so aerobic capacity fit that you're going to excel. It really comes down to the way these are structured with the toes to bar and echo bike and the row and bar facing burpees, is that it comes down to who wants to really take control of the event in 6A and 6B. When you look at those events particularly, what do you get that kind of like nervous guttural reaction knowing what's ahead of those athletes?
My palms are so sweaty right now, actually, just thinking about it. No, I mean, looking at it, I think it is depending on where you sit and depending on your strategy going into it. Do you want to, go balls out in that first part and then maybe suffer on the second part, or vice versa? I think it's going to come down not only to, you want to will the way, you want to make sure that, I'm going to put everything out there, but also your capacity, aerobic capacity, but also your recovery. How quickly can you recover? What's your training been like? Do you do a lot of intervals in your training? Do you do similar short sprints like this? Yes, the cap 6 minutes. How quickly are people going to push it? Are they going to try to get it in that 4-minute time frame? They'll have additional rest, but then are their legs and their body a little more tasked so that they're not going to be able to go into that second part? And I think you said something that's really important. It's like, all right, they're not a very high skill movements. There's something that's that risk is low compared to the muscle ups where like you fail or you can't press out, then you need extra time to rest, recover, so you can hop back up and do a couple more reps. So because that skill is relatively lower, then that opens the door for how fast do you want to push it? Can you continue to get off that bike and go to the toes to bar, rest, recover, go from the row and burpees? So for example, if you're a strong rower and you're like, cool, we're rowing again, you're like, NBD, I'm fine. I will be able to get through this and be fine. And I think, again, Kristen Holte, she kind of pops up in my mind where she loves burpees, like absolutely loves burpees. So you might have athletes that they're going to push the pace on that first one, but they might hold a little bit back to kind of go all out ham, since it will be that last portion of this 2-portion workout. It's going to be spicy.
I'm excited. I think the fifth event, event 5, the first event tomorrow, will be a cool, just classic CrossFit test where people are just going to see kind of what they're made of and who's good at what and whatnot. You know, it's your Fran-like test, which always seems to creep into a competition somehow with push, pull, and the squat portion. But event 6A and 6B, for those that coach, program, have been in this sport for a while, have trained in this sport for a while, you know what is about to be set forth in front of those athletes, and knowing that they have 200 points potentially on the board to grab, like Adrian said, is like, it's going to make people desperate, and desperate people do really amazing things for fans. when
That's great. Yes, you're right.
When watching the sport. But the one thing we don't know is event number 7. And, you know, this is the fun part of the show where we look back and we wonder, you know, how are they filling in those gaps, filling in those holes? And Dubai has always done a pretty robust finale over the years. And they've been like 3-parters. They've been 30 minutes long. They've been massive chippers, everything underneath the kitchen sink when it comes to that. And looking back, we don't have to guess exactly what the event will be, but you know, I'm going to put this on both of you guys to have a little fun, stretch your programming wings and minds. Is, you know, what do you think we may see for that final event going in? Because if it's anything like it used to be, they'll probably hold it to the very end until all settled and done before they release it. Adrian, I'll start with you.
Oh man, it's dangerous. We're playing a dangerous game here. If I think about what the test has looked like so far, and then I just dabble with like my own imagination, I'm saying, hey, you know, we're going probably mid-range workout. So it's not going to be too short. It's not going to be too long, but classic CrossFit time domain. Where the ropes and the dumbbells at? That's what I'm asking. I'm thinking in my mind. It's like, okay, hey. And I don't know to what type of movement. You know, that just popped in my mind though, looking back on what we've tested, what's been there. But dumbbells and ropes got to be sitting somewhere in the back of the athletes' minds. Of like, okay, at some point these things are coming out.
I like that. I mean, you're right. And if you think about Dubai classically in their programming, they've always had a heavy dual dumbbell movement, whether it was them really pioneering the devil press, the dual kettlebell, or they had like single kettlebell snatches for max reps one year. But you're right. I like that. Margaux, what do you think we may potentially see for the final event?
So I definitely thought of rope climbs and dumbbells, but also another odd object. I mean, we already obviously saw the sandbag. It could be something different, but I think that they're going to throw something unique. Again, I personally love odd objects, and I think it'd be unique to see there, especially with that's what they've done with their history in terms of programming, but something that's going to challenge them, something that maybe that's not only going to be both arms, but like a unilateral movement or unilateral leg, you know, some sort of pistols maybe. Again, it's whether you're adding a kettlebell or a dumbbell over overhead single, you know, overhead squats with a single arm. I don't want to pinpoint to one thing, but if I'm looking at broad spectrum, like Adrian said, there are definitely no ropes, whether the legless or regular. Maybe they add the vest in, they do regular, but something that's going to bring people's attention and, you know, ooh, ah, to the crowd and the community. And again, it's hard to pinpoint down, but I would love to see another odd object, a yoke, something else out there. Sled drag.
I like that. I think, man, ropes is a great call. I think legless rope climbs is a great call. I wouldn't be surprised to see some maybe couple of legless rope climbs and heavy devil presses, and then maybe some type of odd object, maybe heavy kettlebell deadlift pistol march to the finish line, possibly. And maybe every 10 feet, do 10 and 20 for 5 sections until you get there. Bring out them heavy dumbbells and heavy kettlebells. So, all right, I feel like we've covered the spectrum. Guessing aside, there's one thing I know for sure is that it is shaking out to be a very, very exciting finish to the weekend. I can't wait. Today was electric. To kick things off in the snow, they brought it back to the duty-free tennis stadium in Dubai. And I mean, how great is that venue? I mean, you talk about
awesome.
the most coveted venue in the history of the CrossFit Games is, yes, it's Aromas, but I feel like more people miss the tennis stadium in Carson, California than anything, right? Aromas has the history. That's where the sport was born, and it's hallowed ground. But if you talk about the most electric
Absolutely.
venue in any competition I've ever seen, off season, in season, regionals, games, the tennis stadium was just a wonderful thing. And to see that replicated in a way in Dubai is pretty exciting. So before we kick off here for day number 2, as we look forward to day number 3, how about a bold prediction from everybody?
Ooh.
I'll even throw something out. I'll throw myself out there as well. But you pick it. You can pick men, women, teams, whatever. Pick one quick, bold prediction going into or what will happen on the final day of competition. Margaux, we'll throw you under the bus first, just to give you more options. Give me a bold prediction for tomorrow.
For Sam Briggs to move up to that one spot.
Oh,
that would be a very bold prediction.
Okay. That's
that's a very bold. I mean, I'm like,
I thought you were going to say podium. I'm like, oh, that is bold.
I mean, like I said, I love the ladies have competed with them, shared the floor with them. I mean, anything's possible. Like I said, I think Laura secured that spot, but if I'm looking at an upset or a complete change of what we have, I would say for Sam to move up to that top spot.
Okay, I like it. Adrian,
bold.
Yes, for bold.
I like it. No,
that was great. Bold letters with impact font, size 36. That's what that was.
Listen, I gotta say, Margaux, that was excellent, because while it's bold and some people argue that that's a stretch, I'm looking at it again and I'm like, that she could potentially go
stretch, but I mean, it's under 100 points. So
right, yeah, and she could easily rack up two event wins in what I see even as an opportunity. So I love that prediction. Mine will be probably less sexy, less exciting. My prediction is that we see the Russian himself, Roman Kronikov, come out and win A and B of athlete's choice.
Like
A and B of athlete's choice.
Back
to back. And to me, that would be one of the most impressive performances yet, because that will be quite the test.
I like that.
That's good.
I like that. Man, now I have all right, I'll make a bold. All right, my bold prediction. It doesn't say now, Mark, you made all our predictions sound boring. My bold prediction that Matt Fraser is going to come out of retirement and win the whole. My bold prediction. I'm gonna put my dark horse on the ladies' side, Andrea Nisler. I'm gonna say she's gonna podium by the end of the day. 400 points up for grabs. You got some just gorilla meat stick, snot nose events tomorrow. I mean,
wheelhouse.
Yeah, yep. Nisler's a savage, and she was a savage before she started training at Mayhem.
Yep.
And she made a huge leap today. So bold prediction, Andrea Nisler, podium.
I can see that.
At
Go
the
get
end
it,
of the
Andrea.
weekend. Go get it. Go get it, and go get it, everyone. Athletes, good luck tomorrow. Thank you for the showcase you guys gave us today, and thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Margaux, for joining the show. And I cannot wait for the fireworks we have tomorrow. 400 points up for grab, 4 different scored events, and one finale that we all just basically guessed going into the third day of competition. That'll do it for us for day 2 recap. We will see you guys tomorrow and recap the end of the Dubai CrossFit Championship.